Welcome to another video in the series of Amazigh history in North Africa. In this video, we will discuss the history of the Libyans in ancient Egypt. Before we dive into the rich history that surrounds these two ancient peoples, it is important to understand key aspects of both societies. First aspect is language. Linguists found that languages in Africa and Western Asia had a lot in common. They used to call African ones Hamitic and Asian ones Semitic, but decided to create a better name, Afro-Asiatic, to group them all together. Both ancient Egyptian and Tamazight or Berber are sister languages in the Afro-Asiatic linguistic family. All linguists agree that Hamitic languages such as Berber, Ancient Egyptian, Cushitic, Omotic, and Chadic are much older than Semitic languages like Hebrew and Arabic. Second aspect is genetics. Amazighs and ancient Egyptians share DNA markers that connect them together. DNA extracted from mummies across North Africa proves these genetic ties are stronger among Egyptians and Amazighs than others. Since Tamazight and Egyptian are sister languages, and Berbers, as an ancient people, are a sister population to ancient Egyptians, therefore, both societies have a common heritage. One of our earliest records of Libyan peoples comes from Predynastic Egypt. Predynastic Egypt means the history of Egypt before the first dynasty. Egyptians, by this time, were already writing their rich legacy on solid stone. Their mastery of architecture and engineering is well shown by the standing pyramids today. In the very small beginnings of Egypt, even before the Egyptians set out to the sea, Egyptians did not yet begin to travel out any further than the safe banks of the Green Nile River, and it wasn't long before Egyptians understood that most people that traveled to the harsh, dry, and unforgiving hot Libyan desert would eventually end up dead. So they determined that the West was an unknown territory and the destination of the dead. Traveling through land was filled with dangers such as robbers, mercenaries, and beasts, as Africa west of the Nile was to them an unknown land, which they called Iment, which means both Libya and the West. Most Egyptians buried their dead in the west side of the Nile, with their heads facing the west. The symbol used to signify the west is the feather, which is associated with Libya. So these are some of the ways Libya is written in ancient hieroglyphs. All of these would be pronounced as Iment. The flat loaves of bread are phonograms, the mountain range a symbol, which means desert cliffs, and the feather or the feather and eagle together are variants of one another in inscriptions. Eagles and feathers are associated with Libya in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Any personalities or deities bearing the feather or eagle symbols are associated with the West. Why is the feather associated with Libya in ancient Egypt? This is because in this tablet, for example, found in the tomb of Seti, we see here an Egyptian depiction of people with light skin wearing this famous feather on their heads, which is the symbol of Libya. This is because Libyans wore this feather on their heads in ancient times, so this means that these characters are representations of Libyans. These characters also have tattooing on their arms, found in Libyan tradition to this day. The ancient Egyptians, eventually through trade and exploration beyond the banks of the Nile, met other people living close to them. The ancient Egyptians record the names they created for their neighbors. The Egyptians called the Amazigh or Berbers west of them as the Tehenu, north, and Temehu, south, which are all populations inhabiting the western Nile. The Rebu and Mishwish are the Amazigh farthest to the Egyptians, and they play a major role in late Egyptian history. To the northeast, the Egyptians named the Canaanites the Amu. In pre-dynastic times, Egypt was divided into two main kingdoms: Upper Egypt with a significant Egyptian population, and a Lower Egypt with a significant Libyan population which lived in the Nile Delta, where the ruling dynasty was Libyan. The capital was Sais, also contained a significant Libyan population where they worshipped Libyan deities. In fact, the archaic name of Sais is Ha-Nit, meaning the house of Neith. Neith, originally a Libyan Berber goddess, well known to the Greeks under the name Athena, and her temple was the great temple of Neith in Sais. Despite periods of prosperity between both kingdoms, turmoil has erupted several times between the two. Sources are scarce on what exactly happened between the two kingdoms before the unification of Egypt. However, it is almost certain the two kingdoms were not always at peace. Around 3100 BC, a man of royal blood called Narmer in Upper Egypt, who came to power during this period of turmoil, he began consolidating his rule from Nechan to Thinus, increasing his control in his realm. This is shown well within the Narmer Palette, which depicts these events. Narmer, as shown here with the hieroglyph of his name on top, is seen executing his enemies within his realm and consolidating power with his armies. At the same time, a noblewoman and queen of Lower Egypt called Neith-Hotep was undisputed ruler of Lower Egypt from its capital Sais. As we hinted in the beginning of the video, this capital is majority Libyan and practices the worship of Libyan deities. So since the noblewoman Neith-Hotep is 1. Named after a Libyan deity, 2. From a majority Libyan city, and 3. Is part of a Libyan ruling class in the Delta. This means that Neith-Hotep is herself Libyan and the oldest known ruling queen in recorded history. Like Narmer, she was trying to improve stability and prosperity in her own realm and avoid the constant warring with the Upper Kingdom. Both kingdoms, weary of war, heavily supported a marriage between Neith-Hotep and Narmer for security and prosperity. Archaeologists have been able to unearth an artifact called the Libyan Palette, which sheds light on the event of the unification as a result of King Narmer of Upper Egypt marrying Neith-Hotep of Lower Egypt. On one side of the palette, there is a scene of walking lines of animals within registers, bovines on the very top, donkeys in the middle of the palette, and goats in the lower part. Libyan cattle has in fact had a widespread reputation in the ancient world, and echoes of domesticated Libyan mare can be found in Homer by the Greeks, who also praised Libyan livestock. Accurate investigation would show that the earlier and best cattle during antiquity originated from the regions of the Tehenu. Below these animals, orchards with olive trees are depicted. Here yet is another aspect of ancient Libyans was, and still is, their fame for producing high-quality olive oil. You may ask, how do we know all of this belongs to the Libyans? The Egyptians did not forget to include the hieroglyphic inscription Tehenu, which refers to the Libyans of Western Nile Delta and Libya. The scene on this tablet is interpreted as a tribute by the peoples of Libya after the unification of Egypt. On the reverse side of the palette, we see the new territories of the Tehenu of the unified kingdom. The square shapes of 7 fortresses, above each is a symbol of a god or goddess such as a hawk, lioness, and scorpion, which all are symbols of power and kingship, and each holds a hoe, performing the foundation ceremony for the town or fortress. Under the register, 7 fortified towns are depicted, with the name of each town written within the wall. Neith-Hotep's husband Narmer died, so Neith-Hotep reigned as regent until their young heir was of age to rule Egypt. Narmer's son from this marriage and the future pharaoh of unified Egypt was Aha. Some of his seals bear the name Saissa, which referred to the city of Sais in Lower Egypt. The name of this king is sometimes met in the form of Hor-Aha, written with a sign of the eagle, which we mentioned earlier. The historical characters bearing the eagle are connected with the West. Hor-Aha erected a temple in Sais to the Libyan goddess Neith. This was a massive boost to the popularity of this new pharaoh, and won him the support of the Tehenu in the Nile Delta. The ancient Egyptians were indeed very careful not to adopt any foreign gods, as pointed out by most Egyptologists, and as such, their adoption of Libyan Neith was a strong indicator to the Libyans that the Egyptians did not consider them as foreigners. There is no evidence that the king waged wars against the Libyans. Peace and trade with the unified kingdoms brought prosperity and wealth to the realm. The generated wealth from trade with the Delta brought massive income that allowed for the erection of several construction projects across the realm.